Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 4th of April, the last Cabinet meeting in this cycle of meetings for this four-year term. So hopefully we'll have a fruitful meeting. Apologies for absence, John.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Filmer.
Thank you. Record of decisions, the record of the previous meeting agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Declarations of interest of any description? No, thank you. Then we go on then to item 4. Councillor Hackwell, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is the annual review of the risk strategy, and it has changed a little bit, but it's not too much. There's the fundamental changes, as you probably read in the report, are the disbandment of the Strategic Risk Management Group, the SRMG, and the leadership will support the risk management with the senior management team. The risk registers will be held at service and project programme level, and one of the main changes is we've changed the categories of the risks between live risks and managed risks. So live risks require continued management and further mitigating action, and managed risks are where all reasonable mitigation has been applied and made into the business as usual, and due to their nature or sensitivity, the risks will still require an overview but won't actually be live managed, but they will be looked at each quarter. We've also simplified the matrix from a 5x4 to a 4x4, so it makes it easier to understand. Unfortunately, the paper was published before the Business OS met, and so the Business OS, and there's a supplementary agenda that they've made some recommendations. So I'd like to add to the recommendations that are on page 15 a third recommendation. And that recommendation is the Cabinet is requested to delegate authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder for business management to consider adding to the risk strategy references to resource risks, risk ratings and unexpected risks as set out in paragraphs 1.9 to 1.1 of the addendum report, if considered appropriate, and make relevant changes to the risk strategy. So I'd like to add that to the two recommendations that are on page 15 already. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to make the point. I think the idea of simplifying the matrix is a good one because I think the way we had it was a bit over complicated. I'd just like to say, having done quite a lot of risk assessments in my working life when I was working for P&O, I actually did the generic risk assessments for the whole P&O ferry group, which was quite an interesting exercise, particularly as a lot of it was outside of my normal working area, so I've got a really good understanding now of this. But what I'd really like to say is to be complimentary to our officers and the organisation, because if we remember back to the very early days of the pandemic, Leader, we were castigated, weren't we, for not having huge, great plans in place. You know, we spent vast sums of money and officers' time and effort in trying to put all these plans into place. We argued the point that the whole organisation was well versed in risk management and could tackle it, and by and large, our officers did exceptionally well. They managed all the risks and dealt with it without a huge, great folder of plans and that would have taken months of work to formulate and would have now been sat on a shelf just gathering dust. So I think it speaks very well of the organisation and our officers that they cope with that. And so our practical, pragmatic way of dealing with risk, I think, works, and I think that's a great compliment to all our officers. Thank you, Leader.
I just want to follow up on that last point that Councillor Golding made there in terms of reference back to COVID and having plans in place for every eventuality. I think officers did more than cope. and you said they coped exceptionally well. I think that's true. I'd go a bit further than that to say that there are examples where we led the way in the South East in terms of response, and I well remember going out to the vaccination centres and seeing that a mixture of civilian and army personnel working under this council's direction to safeguard the people of Medway. So I think there's an example there where our emergency planning officers and public health officers in particular, but many others as well, worked very effectively using the procedures that we have in place now. So I think that the points you make, Councillor Goldwyn, are well made, and that's a fine example, I think, of how this council, I believe, in part because of its unitary status, is able to be fleet of foot and respond to situations as they develop, which other council areas can't necessarily do, particularly those that happen to be in two-tier areas where there are increased levels of bureaucracy. I think that was a demonstration of how well a unitary can function under very difficult circumstances. Back to you, Councillor Hackwell. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I just ask that you agree the recommendations set out on page 15, and including the additional recommendation that I read out.
Is that agreed, colleagues? Agreed. Thank you. Go on to item 5, which is you again, Councillor Hackwell, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so this is the Household Support Fund. We've been given the funding of about £4.5 million to continue with this fund for the next fiscal year, ending in the 31st of March 2024. The report before you goes into the history of the fund and how it was set up in 2000 to help the pandemic and how it goes on. And I think that we're going to continue, the report suggests that we can continue the existing grant scheme that residents can apply for, or officers can fast track if they happen to deal with people that find that they're suitable for this particular scheme. The only one change we're going to make is that anyone who makes regular applications will be referenced to the Money Advice and Pension Service for help and guidance, which we haven't done before, but we're going to make that part of the scheme. One thing is good news for all the young people on free school meals in Medway, that we're going to continue supplying free school meals for all the holidays of this fiscal year, up to £15 per week. So that will continue. The only other thing that I'd bring out in the recommendations is that the Cabinet is asked to agree that there's delegation to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with myself to make other awards in the same vein as we've made before, so maybe to food banks or to warm spaces or things like that, so that we make sure that we spend all the money we get allocated in Medway for Medway. So thank you very much.
Councillor Isles.
Yes, I'd just like to make the comment to say that I'm very pleased that the continuation of the free school meal vouchers are available for all the holidays, regardless of whether, or instead of the Medway Go being operational for those weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Hackwell?
Only that I asked the Cabinet to agree the recommendations set out in section 7 on page 46.
Okay, I will add one further point actually, and this is, as we said on the last item, this is an example where the council worked so effectively in the distribution of grant throughout the COVID period, and of course this is indirectly flows from that, where we distributed well over £100 million of government grant to businesses and the community at large, and did so in such a timely and successful manner. So I think we'll continue to do that distribution of various grants as and when they come down from government, and I think we can all be confident that will be done very effectively. Is that agreed? Agreed. Agenda item 6 is not being taken forward at this time. Agenda item 7, Councillor Isles.
So, Leader, I'm going to start on this one. So I'm pleased to present this report, which sets out the proposals to ensure appropriate levels of good quality mainstream and SEND school places are available through to 2027. Table 1 in Section 3 and Table 2 in Section 4 includes a list of projects, and the report also details the mix available and the funding to carry out the proposals. It also highlights the options for some of these projects to be self-delivered by Academy Trusts, where the Trust is the freeholder of the land and the buildings. Medway Council has a statutory duty to provide sufficient school places, and the school place planning strategy describes the principles, methods and challenges of this duty. The proposals in Sections 3, 4 and 5 of the report follow the school place planning strategy principles, and they also support the Council's plan of supporting Medway's people to realise their potential and the outcome of all children achieving their potential in schools. I'd like to draw members' attention to the resource provision for the maths school in Rochester, which will support the inclusion agenda for high-functioning children, as those children with autism will have who have their academic ability to attend a grammar provision will be able to do so with the support of that new provision in place. And of course, we also have the co-educational proposals which await approval by the regional director, which will provide much greater flexibility with the allocation of school places at those grammar schools. Section 5 identifies projects at academies where the freehold is owned by the Academy Trust. As I mentioned briefly earlier, these projects could be self-delivered by the Academy Trust under the scrutiny of the Council's education project team, very important that, and that be backed by a formal agreement, and the template for that is attached in Appendix 1. By approving the recommendations in Section 11 of the report, the Cabinet will be ensuring that the Council meets its statutory duty to ensure that sufficient and appropriate good quality school places are available in both mainstream and specialist provision, and therefore move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Earls.
Yes, I would just like to add that the funding agreement is a robust agreement, as can be seen in Appendix 1, and that the Council is carrying out its statutory duties in this case. Thank you.
Anyone else? Back to you, Councillor Potter.
Well, just finally, just to thank officers for their work on this. As you can see, it's a pretty ambitious programme here, multi-million-pound programme, both with mainstream and SEND, and we have a strong track record of delivering these projects on time and within budget, and with the new aspect of the self-delivery of the trust, I'm assured with the mechanisms in place around that we will continue to do so.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Go on to item 8, Councillor Earls.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm Thank you. Right. I am pleased to introduce this report, which outlines the proposals to make amendments and additions to the Education Travel Assistance Policy, ETAP, and requests authorisation to commence a period of consultation on the changes. All local authorities have a statutory duty to have in place arrangements for the provision of education travel assistance for children and young people, mainstream and SEND, who meet the published eligibility criteria. The Education Travel Assistance Policy is developed within a national legal framework that sets out what local authorities must do to facilitate travel to school and sets out eligibility criteria for granting that support. The changes proposed will provide a fairer and more progressive education transport assistance policy, which promotes the independence of the pupil. The proposed wording of the policy has also been reviewed for clarity and is attached as Appendix 1. Section 3 of the report sets out the proposed amendments and additions to the policy, and includes the financial impacts of each proposed change. Approving the commencement of the consultation period will ensure that the Council complies with appropriate process to make changes to the Education Travel Assistance Policy. At the end of the consultation period, an outcomes of consultation report will be prepared and presented to Cabinet in July 2023 for determination of the proposals with implementation from the 1st of September 2023. I therefore move that the Cabinet at Recommendations 10 is asked to consider the proposals set out in the report and authorise the Director of People, Children and Adults to commence a 6-week period of consultation to gauge views on the proposed changes to the Education Travel Assistance Policy as set out in Section 3 of this report. And 10.2, Cabinet is asked to note that at the end of the consultation period, an outcomes of consultation report will be prepared and presented to Cabinet in July 2023 for determination of the proposals with implementation from the 1st of September 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, considerable work has gone into this, so I thank Councillor Isles and officers for that. I do believe that this will be a fairer policy and one that actually delivers better outcomes for the pupils. If we can improve the independence of pupils, that is only a good thing. So I give it my full support, and subject to consultation, I hope it does come into force later in the year. Thank you.
Any other member? Councillor Isles.
No, nothing much further to add except to say that this will actually provide our pupils with a form of independence that they can grow from, and overall it is a very good policy, and I hope that the consultation will have good feedback. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 9, Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you, Leader. This report provides an update on the school place planning strategy, which is 2022 to 2027. It's the 5-year period of the strategy. It outlines a proposed extension to the school place planning principles set within the school place planning strategy to include principles to cover the selective sector and the selection process in more detail. The proposed principles in Section 3 of this update to the school place planning strategy would add to the existing principles to help guide decision-making on selective schools. They would support the council plan priority of supporting Medway's people to realise their potential and the outcome of all children achieving their potential in schools. It's important to have education provision that meets the needs and abilities of all our children and young people in Medway, and this Conservative administration, as members will know, has a proud record of recognising the excellent role our grammar schools play for our most academically gifted children, regardless of income or background, and that's especially important when it comes to narrowing the attainment gap. And as long as we have a Conservative administration in Medway, those grammar schools are in safe hands. By approving the recommendations in Section 9 of the report, the Cabinet will be ensuring that the Council meets its statutory duty to ensure sufficient and appropriate good quality school places are available in selective schools. I therefore move the recommendation as set out in Section 9 of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Isles.
Nothing further to add except I fully support this, and I would like to thank officers for their work and effort on this. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hackworth, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Leader. Just to say, I was very pleased to read in the report that we're going to increase the number of Medway children that are going to get selective places rather than out-of-area children. So I think it's a very good step in the right direction. So I thank you for the report.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Of course, that increase in provision is very much linked to the earlier item there, because we need those co-educational proposals to be agreed by the regional director for us to do that. And of course, we do have a challenge going forward in terms of maintaining a minimum of 25% provision with the proposed growth that's in Medway and particularly on the Hoo Peninsula. And we are continuing to look at the potential for grammar annex provision in Medway to meet that demand as our existing grammar schools meet or get to an ideal capacity. So yes, thank you to members for their comments, and yeah, move the recommendation once again.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 10, Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to introduce the Children's Services Sufficiency Strategy, A Place to Call Home, to Cabinet today. This refreshed strategy sets out how Medway Council, as the corporate parent, will meet our duty to provide and commission the right care and support for children in our care and care experienced young people that best meets their needs in our local area. Central to enabling this is that we can provide enough places that our children can call home with the right love, care and support wrapped around them. In Medway, we are ambitious for our children. We want them to live with their families wherever possible, with the right support in place to make their childhood successful and happy. Where that is not possible, it is crucial that we have the right services and support in place to care for those children and to ensure that they grow up in supportive homes where their needs are met and which promote their outcomes. For our care leavers, we want more young people to move to homes which are most suited to them and find suitable places to live after leaving care. Like many other local authorities, Medway faces challenges in providing enough places, some of which are recognised nationally. For example, the number of children requiring specialist support and a lack of foster carers, leading to a growth in the use of residential homes. We know the challenges local authorities face to provide the right homes for children in care at an affordable price are becoming even greater. In response to these challenges over the past 2 years, the Council agreed a significant investment to drive forward proposals to develop a range of preventative and support interventions to manage demand and to create a stronger, more visible presence with providers to shape the market to provide more local places that our children can call home. Building on this work, this strategy outlines Medway's challenges and sets out the sufficiency priorities and key actions over the next 3 years. We have focused these across 4 foundation themes. 1, supporting families. We want to support more children to safely remain in the care of their parents. 2, a place to call home. We want more children in our care living in family homes in Medway. 3, promoting stability. We want to make sure individual children's needs are supported at the right time in a stable and caring environment. Moving forward, we want to ensure our care leavers find suitable places to live. The sufficiency strategy is also at the heart of creating a financially sustainable children's service. Whilst we must meet our statutory duty to provide the right care and support, the foundation themes are intended to help reduce or manage escalating costs wherever possible. The progress of this strategy will be monitored and tracked by the Children's Services Management Team, led by the Assistant Director of Children's Social Care, as a key programme within the improvement plan. The strategy will have an annual review of progress. As per the recommendations of this paper at 10.1, the Cabinet is asked to note the comments from the Children and Young People Overview and Scrutiny Committee as set out at section 6 of the report, and 10.2, the Cabinet is asked to approve the 2023-25 Sufficiency Strategy as set out in Appendix 1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, members don't need me to tell you that this is an extremely challenging area. If you look on page 6 of the report, or of the strategy, which is page 162 of the report pack, you can see there those trends with children coming into the care system and that upward trend both locally and nationally. The slight plateau nationally during the pandemic period, albeit not in Medway. And of course, that's where the challenge lies, because you've got a limited number of places. you've then got those additional children coming into care. I thank Councillor Arles and thank officers for the work they've done to produce this work and this report. I think the document is a very good one. I think it's very well presented. I think the information is very accessible. And I know that there's so much detailed work that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that we have children in secure placements, and we try and provide as much stability as we can to those children coming into the care system at such a vulnerable time in their lives. So yes, extremely challenging area, but I think this report is a very good one, and I feel we're in good hands with the team that we have here in Medway.
Anyone else? Just to agree with what has been said about the challenges in the provision of children's social care across the piece, this report will help us to address some of those, but nonetheless, as has just been pointed out, it is a national problem, and I think here in Medway we have particular challenges because of our juxtaposition with London boroughs and the big counties who are despite their complaints about resourcing, they are much better resourced than Medway Unitary. Councillor Arles.
Yes, thank you for your comments. All I can add is that, you know, we have strived in our improvement journey to, you know, to ensure that we have preventative measures and also the caring measures in place for the stability of our children. You know, to enable them to actually live and thrive in a home, in you know, loving homes. And the same goes for our care leavers. We want to make sure that, you know, they have suitable accommodation and the appropriate support should they need it once they've left care. It is vitally important that we actually do that. And as you know, I've been an advocate of early help preventative measures from the very beginning of our journey. And this, I think this report, when you know, you can see within it that we do have things in place, and we also will monitor the progress and you know, actually deliver a very good children's services across the board. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank officers for the extremely hard work and commitment that they put to this. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 11, Councillor Chambers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Shared Prosperity Fund and Multiply Year 1. I think I just want to reflect back that we've heard a lot about the central government's levelling up agenda and the initiatives that it believes they should be used for. And it was always said, well, we won't see anything in the south, it will all go to the north. Well, here is tangible evidence that that is not the case. And I'm proud of the fact that to be associated with our team that made the bid and have made more than one bid under the Levelling Up Fund agenda, and how successful Medway has been, because this is a welcome addition to the first round of the Levelling Up Fund, which we secured 14 million for 3 projects. And of course, this 3.3 million is a welcome addition. And it is a tribute to the officers and the way that they have supported me in putting forward a very strong case for Medway. And I'd like to put my thanks, as this will be the last time that I will be able to report any bidding that I've been associated with towards funds, various headings, and I find it very difficult to even remember now the names of all of them, but they do come up from time to time. And I think at each one of those that we've had awards is because of the strength of Medway's bid. Now getting back to why this is on the agenda, it's on the agenda for the very reason it says so at the top. The only point I would like to make, and members may not know this, it says that this is to replace the EU structural funds that we were in receipt, and we've been in receipt of those across a number of areas, and Mrs. Chitty knows that extremely well because she had the role of actually seeing that of not only making bids under the structural fund, but also seeing that for what they were intended for were implemented here in Medway. Well, we moved on, and the report, I think does highlight the area and priorities that we are using these funds for, and I think they are outlined at 1.1, and of course there are 3 established council priorities, and we will all be well versed with those. Now, this is a report on what we have been doing and with as far as the first phase, as it's the funding, as you will see at 2.24 and at 2.32 comes in 3 phases, and this is a report on phase 1 and how we're going to take the expenditure that has been identified into phase 2. I don't intend to insult members by saying, going through and reading the whole report, but I do urge you to look at the background and then how the Prosperity Fund programme has been progressed, and also the Medway Multiply programme. And you'll see that there has been a great interest in round 1, and that's identified at 3.35. So I just recommend this report to you as success at phase 1, and now we have to consider moving on to phase 2, and I welcome the suggestions as far as that is concerned. I would take issue with the risk management is where it says the description, the SPF allocation for Medway is relatively small. Well, I've always used the argument in any funding initiatives that central government has come out with, anything is better than nothing. And I think we've done well as far as all our bids are concerned. And also, we have received plaudits back from wherever the source of the funding come from, is because we have a record of delivery as far as those funds are concerned. And I think it's our record of delivery which has enabled us to be successful at each funding initiative, because it's helped us guarantee and show evidence that if we make a bid, we have allocations made, and we do deliver, and we deliver on time. And that is also welcomed by the various government departments. In fact, many of them like to hold Medway up as an exemplar because there's nothing more than central government likes, if it's brought out an initiative, is success. And I found this in the early days under sustainable communities, that when we, and that was a Labour government, but nevertheless we got money from them also, and they were sceptical that we, Medway, were able to deliver on the programme, and but once they found that Medway kept its promises and delivers, suddenly I had a whole queue of government ministers taking credit for their funding initiative and coming down to Medway, because there's nothing like a government likes is to prove it was right in whatever initiative.
Or better one sinner repenteth, Rodney.
Yes, that's right. So nothing more ado than propose the recommendations at 13.1, 13.2 and 13.3. I would point out that at 13.3 it is to posts rather than to individuals, because my view is the holder of both those posts are not known at this point in time. So with that, I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Doe.
I'm happy to second those, and in doing so, can I first of all pay a tribute really to the enormous amount of work and successful work that over the years Councillor Chambers has done in securing funds for this council, and what a vital part that's played actually in the way in which Medway has developed. I think there are two things that, two or three things that drive this bid. I think the first is that one of Councillor Chambers' I think successes in a way was to actually get the government to realise that it isn't as simple as saying that the north is poor and the south is rich, etc., etc. You know, it's very simplistic. We have here, as well as areas of some prosperity, we've also got areas of quite some deprivation. And these programmes, I think, are in a way showing that we are inventing proper ways and innovative ways of dealing with this. And I think the realisation that, as well as the skill in English, that the skill in maths goes right the way through virtually all human activity, I think is what is going to be the success, I believe, of the Multiply programme. And certainly, I think that when it comes to adult education, which comes to my responsibilities, I think that you will see that our investment, of course, in the new hub in Gillingham, which is designed to really provide up-to-date training, will be extremely successful. And I think that having these programmes shows really that I think we're dealing with a population that wants to succeed, and we're providing the tools for that. And that can't be seen easily in a way that in the ESOL classes, there's been an enormous boom in ESOL classes, English as those that want to learn English and therefore to prescribe. And what we're working on now is a programme whereby people graduate through different stages so they can see that you know, there are opportunities there and their progress is properly monitored and recognised. And I think that's very, very important. The other thing I think which characterises this bid is the terrific partnership that we've engendered. This is the classic case of a local authority acting as an enabler as well as doing its part of it. And what that means by being an enabler is not only in bringing opportunities to the right doorsteps, but actually encouraging those people to dare to do these things, which otherwise, you know, it's much more easy not to venture. But we lead from the front, and I think that more and more organisations are beginning to see that is successful, and they also are beginning to take reasonable managed risks in order to get ahead. And that's the way forward for Medway. And I think if you come back to us in, you know, whatever the years are, you'll see the fruits of what, in fact, you've done, Councillor Chambers, in the sense of bringing in these enormous amounts of money, which have really been successfully invested. And this programme, I think, is going to be an absolute key to getting us to the next stage, the stage where we have a really good, well-trained workforce that is both literate and numerate and able to cope with the various demands that are being made from an increasingly complex job market. So I think that all of that I congratulate you on, but also I think we've got a very firm base as we go into year 2, and I think that that base will really turn into a very successful programme and will be recognised as such. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Chitty.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Chambers for his comments. We go back a very, very long time, the days of John Prescott, and actually applying for funding for regeneration and having to explain quite rightly and quite properly the importance of where that funding would go and what it would support. And we were very successful, and I think John Prescott was very well aware not only of Councillor Chambers but also of myself, and understood that the ambition that we had, we fervently believed in it, and we really wanted to set, if you like, the foundations to what was to come later. Now, European funding was hugely important at the beginning, and certainly I made various trips over to Brussels, and they recognised not just me, but the officers who did the most remarkable work in actually promoting Medway and what we were trying to achieve. And that was very fruitful in terms of funding. But at the end of the day, it isn't so much about that. It is about the ambition and the ability to be able to take that ambition forward. And these funding streams are absolutely vital to enable us to do that. It doesn't just apply to one sector. It has the effect of reaching out in all directions and to all of Medway's population. It will impact on them. That has happened through the early days of regeneration. People don't always realise it, they don't always acknowledge it. That's fine, as long as it is there. And to be able to continue that ambition, please God it happens, that ambition, and to still have the energy, and the energy is absolutely fundamental to being able to achieve it, because once you start, you have to keep working at it like nobody's business. To raise these funds, and to raise these funds in the interests of Medway residents. There will be more. It's a great pity that there's always a bit of a rat race in terms of funding. But I have to say, we as an authority are well ahead in identifying where there are possibilities of raising funding, and we're not proud. We quite happily will chase the money, because that funding will make a difference. It will put something positive back into Medway. So, you know, I have to acknowledge Councillor Chambers' work in dealing with the great and the good, and actually accessing funding and being very aware that it's always a fight, and he was certainly up for the fight. And I've been very privileged actually to work alongside him on some of these really, really big projects. For that, I will always be grateful. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Goldwyn, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I'd also like to follow Councillor Chitty and Councillor Doe in praising Councillor Chambers' efforts in levering in money into Medway. It's been a privilege over the last few years to substitute for Councillor Chambers on the odd occasion at the Select meetings. And it was quite amazing when I went to those meetings, as feeling a bit of like a fish out of water, I've got to be honest sometimes, but the high regard that Medway was held at those meetings. And as Councillor Chitty has well pointed out, it's about delivery, and Medway has got a record for delivering these projects, and it has made a huge difference to our regeneration, and it's acted as sort of seacorn funding for much greater leverage of money back from the private sector as well. And I think our regeneration and capital projects teams within the council have done a really, really good job with that delivery. As I've got to say, the Medway Development Company in the last couple of years has also with the projects at Britton Farm, and as well as the work we're doing in Chatham. So I think this has been a good example of team working delivery to the benefit of Medway people, and I think both Councillor Chambers and Councillor Chetty have got much to be proud of, and a really good legacy for the benefit of Medway, and I think they both deserve a great deal of praise for that. Thank you, Leader.
Anyone else? Thank you, Councillor Golding. Just a couple of comments from me. I just refer members back to the peer review that we had a number of years ago, and some of the feedback we got from that. And one specific piece of feedback, there were two that really jumped out at me in terms of Medway wide and taking Medway forward. The first one was our monumental regeneration programme, not my words, the independent peer review team's words. And we were praised for our partnership working as well, and quite rightly so. And we can see from the report, page 183, 184, examples of that partnership working. And we've always believed, this administration throughout its life has always believed that we can achieve much more by working with others than we ever can on our own. And I think that's been demonstrated time and time again. And there's another example of it here in this report. So yes, others have said, well, it's not a great deal of money, but I think this report demonstrates what you can do with the available money and how you can pursue the right and proper outcomes for Medway people, and that's what this report points to. And of course, as Councillor Chambers said in his opening speech, we have a fine track record of delivery of projects, invariably on time, almost exclusively within budget, and that is down to foresight. It's down to scoping the projects correctly in the first place, and it's down to ongoing monitoring of delivery. So I think that track record of delivery hasn't been arrived at by accident. It's something this administration, one of the more unsung things that I think this administration can be proud of. Back to you, Councillor Chambers, please.
Thank you, and thank colleagues for their kind words. I've always regarded the regeneration of Medway, and I always put it following the devastating effect of the closure of the dockyard to be one of my highest priorities. And to me, that transcends party politics, because I always said, when I was accused, as I had been in the last 20 years, of leading a Conservative administration that took money from a Labour government. And I turned around and said, I will take money from anybody, provided it is legal, which is going to be to the benefit of the people of Medway, because they come first. And I'm pleased to say that we have been able to use that argument at all funding initiatives, whether it stems from the start with Sustainable Communities in 2002, right through to the growth fund of the Conservative government that came out in 2010, and then the subsequent different iterations of that, Getting Building Fund, Growing Places Fund, and this is why I said earlier I find it difficult to keep track of all of these, because they're all funded and the funding requirements to people like ourselves are different on each one. But the one thing I will say is that all monies that come in that direction are time limited, as indeed is the one that is before us today. And we have always recognised that and have made sure that any bids we put in, we can meet those time limits and indeed we can meet the costing limits. And as the leader has said, we have been successful, second to none in that. But for me, my whole political life, going back a considerable number of years, has not been anything to do with party politics. I put the people of Medway and the Medway towns, as of course as it used to be when I first joined local government, as the priority above everything else, and that we have a duty to take any opportunities that come forward, particularly as far as funding, that will work to the benefit and to the, if you like, the enjoyment as well, because we did get a considerable amount of money, and Councillor Doe will know this, for the redevelopment of Medway Park. So it wasn't all about creating jobs and building houses, but it was generally spread right across the community. So with that, I move the recommendations as I outlined earlier in the meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brake, item 12, please.
Thank you, Leader. This, in fact, is to present today the Annual Director of Public Health Report for 22-23, which is entitled Hypertension. Directors of public health across the country have a statutory duty to produce an annual public health report. These reports highlight key issues impacting on the health and well-being of the population of Medway. The recommendations within the annual public health report focus on system-wide action to address identified issues. This year, the Director of Public Health has chosen the topic of high blood pressure, commonly termed as hypertension. Hypertension is often termed the silent killer. Many people may have high blood pressure, but be unaware of they are at risk of severe consequences if untreated. The unfortunate outcome could be a stroke or heart attack. Whilst we have made progress in Medway to identify and supporting people living with high blood pressure, the prevalence is still too high. 1 in 5 adults, residents, locally have hypertension. There are estimated 30,000 people walking around Medway who have hypertension, but not known that this is their condition. And of course, it is a condition that can go a long time with no symptoms, hence the term silent killer being used. With many people discovering too late that they have high blood pressure. Fortunately, high blood pressure is largely preventable. There are many programs in place across Medway to support people to access help and take action should it be found. They have high blood pressure. For example, Medway is one of the best performing areas in the South East for the NHS Health Check programme. This service is focused on identifying people aged 40 to 74 who may have hypertension or other health problems. The report recommendations set out the local action that needs to be taken specifically related to prevention, early detection and the high quality treatment of high blood pressure. These recommendations have been reviewed, commented on and endorsed by both the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Cabinet are asked to note the annual report and the comments of these two committees. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Doe.
Well, I'd like to also emphasise the importance of this report and the concern that both we should all share, really. I think that the Medway is very good in the sense that it's the second highest local authority in the South East in early identification of the problem. But it's also a question not only of medication but of lifestyle. And when you think that they say that nearly one in 5 adults are diagnosed with it, of course that means, what about those that aren't diagnosed? There's an awful lot. So it really is quite a sizable proportion of our population suffering from this. And in a sense, one of the things which in a way impacts on mental health as well is that everybody has to a certain extent, manage their own mental health and manage their own tensions. Other people can help. I mean, your GP can help by prescribing. You can help by, taking regular exercise and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, it's how your thinking is structured that actually governs quite a lot of this. And I think that as I myself have got a partner who suffers very, very much from this problem, it is sometimes quite bleak, and it's something that has to be qualified, and really something for which until recently there hasn't been a lot of sympathy for it, because people just, it's not like if you see someone who is obviously with a large bandage around their head or something like that, or they've got their arm in a sling, you think, oh dear, poor people. If they're actually it's all within, in a sense, then it isn't. It can come across in other ways. So I think really the great thing is that we're now focusing on this, and we are focusing on really giving people the tools to actually manage their own hypertension, and also training where necessary, and also make sure that when people take regular checks first of all, but also when they go and see various medical experts, that actually they do pick up this hypertension, and they do realise that this has quite a knock-on effect. And if you look at the knock-on effect, they are quite serious. If you look at section 2.2, blood pressure is too high for a sustained period. It can lead to heart and circulatory diseases, kidney failure, heart failure, problems with sight, vascular dementia, and ultimately death. So you have to manage that. And I think that this report is very timely and very much welcomed. And I do hope that people will read this, and that, generally speaking, there'll be a much greater awareness of the need to manage this condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, I think it should be said today that our public health team in Medway are second to none. We talked about partnership working earlier. So important to so much of what the council does, and what I will say is the public health team really do exemplify that, and that there's barely an event in Medway, whether it's a council event or whether it's an event by a third party, where the team are not in attendance. When we have the Medway Mile event and Armed Forces Day, they're out in big numbers, huge stalls there, covering a whole array of different areas of health and well-being. And of course they have that cigarette mascot that runs around in the race and deliberately loses the race, of course, because we are making the point that smoking is bad, and therefore the cigarette does not win the mascot race. And of course I do have my challenge with our Director of Public Health when it comes to running as well, which we will do at some point. He's not going to get away with it. Last year he had an injury and then he went on holiday and whatever else. He only seemed to be limping when I was around, but there we are. Yeah, I'm sure he was, yes. I've been, every time I see him, I do tell him about my new PBs I've been setting at the park run every week at Great Lines. But no, I take my hat off to our public health team and the ever-present work they do across Medway. Thank you.
I actually think that, Councillor Potter, you may well be inadvertently contributing to high blood pressure in some parts, because I'm sure when these ladies see you in your Speedos, I'm sure then palpitations come on. Back to you, Councillor Bray.
Oh, dear, dear. Thank you, Leader. When the Health and Wellbeing Board was first created, we had the doctor that was appointed to our board was Dr. Peter Green, a local GP. And his opening words to the Health and Wellbeing Board was, in fact, that prevention is obviously better than cure. And I had, in fact, written that note down, but following your comments regarding Councillor Potter and his Speedos, I think, Councillor Potter, in the terms of prevention, please, it might be better if you change your attire, because it would be far better. Far better than
point of order here, I don't wear Speedos.
No, not at all, not at all. Thank you for the kind comments that have been made about the public health team, and in particular the report that is in front of you today. The report does in fact make interesting reading, and having read through it, I look at myself and I think, yeah, perhaps there's a couple of points that I ought to pick up on that and change of lifestyle. And I think each and every one of us could benefit from that. It's some 10 years actually since public health came into, or back into, the domain of the local authority, and Public Health England passed the responsibilities across to Medway, and it was Councillor Chambers who phoned me up one day and said, oh, this is happening, 2013, public health is coming into the local authority. I've been thinking about this, and I think public health would fit quite neatly under your wing. I said, but I don't know anything about public health, Councillor Chambers. Oh, no, that's not really a problem, and I'd heard these words many times before. Don't worry, you'll soon pick it up. And here we are 10 years on. I've picked up an awful lot about public health, including hypertension. But if I may dwell on some of the work that has been undertaken by public health over the years, we've had smoking cessation, effectively reducing smoking right across Medway, and have always been highly commended for the work that has been done across Medway. We've tackled obesity at all ages, but unfortunately the pandemic did in fact hinder the issues that we had. And of course, smoking, obesity, healthy living, healthy eating, all of these sorts of things do in fact contribute to the very subject that has been chosen this year, that being hypertension. The healthy eating and the healthy living not only went into the house and the homes of people, but also went into the workplace. And the areas that our public health team had gone into to make sure that the word was there and for their help and support was quite incredible. In fact, we've spoken this afternoon about the activities, and of course the Medway Go programme, which was initiated by the public health team and has proved to be extremely popular with young people. I know that many councillors took time out and do take time out to go around and see some of the work that's been undertaken. But of course, my favourite story that I have of the work of the public health team and the Medway Go programme is that the Brompton Academy, where we had the police there explaining to youngsters about their work, showing the sort of exercise that police officers were involved in. And of course, police officers always have a pair of handcuffs on them. And when I was invited to go along and sit with these young people, a sixth sense actually told me that it wouldn't be long before the handcuffs would be applied to me. And indeed they were applied, but not by a police officer, but by this this young 8-year-old. And as he applied them, there was a presenter there from Meridian Television, and he turned to this little boy and he said, "Now don't forget," he said, "when you snap the handcuffs," he said, "you must say, 'and you're nicked.'" And this little boy, he put the handcuffs on. I held out my wrists and he applied these handcuffs, and he said, "You're isolated." And everybody looked at him and started to chuckle, and he said, "Yeah, and you're also nicked." Because, of course, at that time we were just beginning to come out of the pandemic. But lots of happy memories of those events where it demonstrated how close our public health team were able to come to supporting the young people and the not so young across Medway. The pandemic was, of course, a great part of public health work, and this has been spoken of earlier this afternoon. But the preparation of food boxes, food parcels that could be distributed across the towns to those who needed it. All of these things are all part of keeping Medway healthy and keeping Medway going. And I think the choice of reducing hypertension in Medway, I think, all goes around all of the things that go on across Medway for each and every one and members of our community. So I commend the report to you. You're asked to support the recommendation being to, as set out on page 200, recommendation 11, 11.1 through to 12. I would so move, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And the final item 13 to you again, Councillor Brake.
Oh, yes. Thank you. This almost follows on from the hypertension, because it's all part of problems that are encountered across the community. But here we're talking about GP access and the work that was undertaken by the task group and the minority report. It's a strange title that has been put down here, but basically what has happened is that the task group went out to find out more about what was happening across the borough, across Medway, as to exactly what was going on with regard to GP and access by people across the community. Now, we in the Health and Wellbeing Board have been alerted to the fact that GP services weren't as good as they were pre-pandemic, and it became very clear that work was required. But we had to emphasise within the Health and Wellbeing Board that when it comes to strategy, that is the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And we certainly took these issues up with representatives from the NHS bodies that were present with us. But of course, when it comes to actually doing task group work, that really came under the remit of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And it's very true that they did a good deal of work, but unfortunately trying to get access to GPs proved to be as difficult as it is and still is for members of the public to actually get to see a GP. And this was a task group wanting to go into surgeries, wanting to speak with GPs, wanting to understand what were the issues within the GP practices. And as a task group, they had the same difficulty as each and every one of us I know has encountered across the borough trying to get appointments with the GP. At the end of the day, the number of GPs actually spoken to was in single figures, but this was presented at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and the decision was taken that they wanted this to come to Cabinet, really to identify the issues that they'd found, and really to say the work is not completed, and really the recommendation that comes out of this is that the work should be carried on into the summer so that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can in fact still continue to work on this programme. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to see any light at the end of the tunnel. So that is a general view on the GP Access Task Group, and the recommendations are there, and I would so move. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Bragg. I think it's a real shame that such an important issue has become somewhat of a political football. I believe that the task force should be allowed to carry on and do a complete report, because without doubt there is something fundamentally wrong with primary care and the access that our residents, indeed ourselves, find it difficult in getting a GP appointment. It's been quite remarkable, Leader and colleagues, over the last few months, talking to people on the doorsteps for a little event next month. But when you ask residents what are their concerns, the issue of lack of GP access has come up on the doorsteps far more times than has potholes. And I think that shows the level of concerns. In the last few months, I've read some interesting statistics which may have a bearing on this. One survey said that the average GP only worked 3 days a week, and another one said only 2.5 days a week. There is something fundamentally wrong with that, because if people cannot get an appointment readily to see a GP, the next step, quite rightfully, is to turn up at a local hospital, and that puts huge pressure on the accident and emergency department. Whilst modern things like telephone apps are very useful, I've got one on my phone. A lot of residents are not able to access or deal with that technology. And a little while back, I came across a gentleman in Prince's Park who phoned up a local GP practice to get an appointment. He was told that he was number well into double figures of the queue. He told me he phoned up just after 10 o'clock in the morning. He got to 12 p.m, midday, and he was now into single figures, and a message flashed up. Yeah. Sorry, the practice is now closed till 2:30 in the afternoon. Ring back then. I mean, these sort of issues is just totally unacceptable in the modern time. So I believe that this is a really important task group. Task groups will always have more authority if politics are left at the door, and you could have a unanimous decision. And I think that worked exceptionally well when we had a task force on the problem we had with gambling here in Medway. And that was a very, very powerful task group report. And I think we as a cabinet have always listened and held in great regard the reports and the various task groups that we've had. So I think the need to goes back. Whether it has the same membership, it probably won't, but it is such an important issue. I think we need to have a strong, unanimous report from the groups, and then we can, certainly through the Health and Wellbeing Board and other agencies, we can highlight the problem, and certainly something does need to be done about it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, I attended the last Health Scrutiny Committee with a members item around the issue of access to GPs and specifically the utilisation of the Raynham Healthy Living Centre. I know there are similar challenges elsewhere in Medway, and that followed on from a petition I submitted to that committee or through the council and then to that committee in 2021. This is a big area of challenge. It was never going to be a quick piece of work. It's a very, very complex issue. But what I will say is around partnership working. Now, partnership working is a two-way street. I've always said that of education, and the same applies to health, and we do need to ensure that our health colleagues are contributing as much to this issue as we are, especially as it is their area of responsibility. At the end of the day, we are there to hold them to account and work in partnership, but ultimately they need to be engaging with us on this matter. Thank you.
I think the problem here is actually one can always look at anecdotal evidence that, you know, and some of it actually works the other way. You know, there are a lot of GPs that actually you don't see quite a lot of the work GP does, and a lot of them actually are working incredible hours. So I think that what we need to do, if you're going to have any kind of impact with this, two things have got to happen. One is we've got to get the health service behind this, the desire to improve it. And secondly, because of the way in which the health centre, the NHS is set up, then I think you've got to actually get the doctors to see that it isn't always a question of working harder, it's a question of working smarter. It's a question of actually dealing with your patients in a way that in a sense, doesn't waste the resources. Why should it be difficult to contact a GP? No reason, really. It's just that, except for the fact that they are, there are appointments in a very short space of time. And one of the things which I think one's got to bear in mind is if you are a GP, you have 10 minutes to actually per appointment, and to actually, how on earth you can cope with that, to actually know the patient's history, right, in a sense, that, so you don't prescribe something that is not helpful, and then you've got to make that decision and get it right. So I think in some ways, it's not all in the sense of smack the GP. I think actually it's the system that is wrong. And I think that what we need to do is to shine a light on that system, and that can be done effectively by this sort of report and by lobbying from the Health and Wellbeing Board, and actually getting the NHS generally to face up to a problem that it doesn't know how to solve, and actually start to get away. It's not a question simply of throwing money at it. It's a question of having methods, having proposals that are likely to work, and then lobbying for extra finance if that is needed. But just lobbying for extra finance just doesn't work, because it'll go down into the same waste bin that a lot of the other money has gone because of the inefficient way in which it's being used.
Just a couple of comments from me, if I can. I think members more widely across the council will be well advised to look at the report produced by Greater North Kent on this very subject. And we spent some time, and Greater North Kent, as colleagues will know, is made up of 6 councils, including KCC, and represents almost 800,000 people. So it's a significant voice in this debate, and we spent some good while coming to our conclusions and eventually publish a report. And we spent some while because it's fundamentally, in my view, it would be fundamentally wrong to see any of this work as an attack on individual GPs. That is the last thing we want to do, and that is not what any of us are suggesting. And Councillor Teri talked about the system within which primary care operates, and I think that is the challenge before us. So I think Greater North Kent's report was very useful in that respect. It did shine a light on things. It did shine a light on the failings of primary care, and in particular the difficulty of access to GPs. And I can speak from personal experience of being, some months ago, being number 63 in the queue. You can probably guess with my temperament, I didn't sit around for 63 to time out. But that's some of the problems we're faced with. Undoubtedly, their name recognition came up. That was probably part of the problem. I do think that on page 237, I do think the key word for me in all of this is interim. Were a council officer to come to me as leader and say, I've got a report, but it's not quite finished yet, councillor, but I'd like you to take it to cabinet, I think most people could guess what sort of response they will get. Interim is precisely that. And what I think Councillor Brake is alluding to, and he can confirm this in a moment, that the recommendations as set out asked us to consider the minority report, consider the decision of the committee, and what action, if any, that arises. I suspect the action that Councillor Brake will be proposing is that the committee continues with its work. Councillor Brake.
Thank you, Leader. You're absolutely right in what you've said. In fact, on page 234, 3.6 of the report says the minority report is submitted to Cabinet along with the decision of the committee, which was to note the interim report from GP Access Task Group, not forward the report to the Cabinet at this stage, agree that the report and its draft recommendations be revisited in the summer when the work can be completed with more engagement with GPs. The only thing that has come out there is that they did say not to forward the report to the Cabinet at this stage, just as you'd outlined, but certainly the other 2 points, noting the interim report, and it is, as you say, an interim report, and secondly, to agree that the report and its draft recommendations be revisited in the summer when the work can be completed with more engagement with GPs.
That's right. And okay, and before I just ask members to agree that, it can come back in due course to the next Conservative Cabinet when it is formed from July onwards. Is that agreed? Agreed. Before I close the meeting, I just want to make 1 or 2 comments, if I can. Basically, looking back on some of the achievements of this administration, but more than that, going back to when Conservatives formed the first Cabinet, which was in October 2001. A lot of water has flowed under Rochester Bridge since then, and there is no doubt that throughout that time the confidence of the public in the Conservatives has increased, election on election, and we will see how that plays out on the 4th of May. But I think our track record is exemplary. I think there are 1 or 2 things that we would found more difficult, which was in particular the inadequate rating for children's services. And that's where I want to start in terms of a very quick review of what we've been doing. And I think the progress that we've made on children's services, evidenced by the regular monitoring reports that we've received, is very much going in the right direction, very much doing our duty by Medway's children, investing substantial sums of money in order to get us to the place where we need to be. And I know we have an ILACS inspection, the next ILACS inspection coming up around July time. And I think we have reason to be optimistic that we will move out of intervention, and the inspection regime will demonstrate that Medway is making the progress that it needs to make for Medway's children. So that's my first comment. And then leading on from that, I think we can be very proud of our school's performance, a high number, 97% or whatever it is, good or outstanding schools in Medway. That's a significant achievement. Councillor Potter mentioned grammar schools early on, and I think that Medway is proud to be among those council areas which remain the last bastions of selective education. I happen to believe personally that is the right approach for Medway children. Medway parents certainly agree with that, and I think the approach that we've taken all these years is the right one. And I think the way that we've found a mechanism for providing more grammar school places within the constraints that government have put on us, I think that is absolutely the right approach. Moving on to other things, we talked about successful regeneration earlier, and if we look back not just the last 4 years, but the last 22 years, we can see how much Medway's changed for the better, and we can see regeneration taking shape, new jobs being provided, new homes being provided, and that is something we will look back on with some pride. And what we've been able to do, using our strapline, Growth for All, is do our best to make sure that those improvements touch all parts of Medway, so that everyone in Medway eventually will benefit from the growth and from the regeneration. And we've already seen investment across all our towns, to a lesser or greater extent. Substantial investment going on now in Chatham at creation of our city centre, and I think that is evident. People only have to look at the skyline in Chatham to see how that's changing, and that will make an enormous difference. The work that we've done at Britton Farm in Gillingham, for example, providing more adult education facilities, providing more housing, and turning a pretty rundown area into something fit for the 21st century. And of course, my particular baby has been the Innovation Park Medway, and we've seen how that's coming on. The southern site is, the groundworks are finished, it's ready for building, our first tenants are in place, and the northern site, first tenants will be signed up soon, and the groundworks will be finished very soon. And overall, on that site, we will see up to 3,000 high GVA, high-tech jobs, and plenty of opportunities for Medway people, and not least those coming out of university here. What we've sought to do is always maintain the lowest council tax in Kent, which we've always managed to achieve. We're very proud of our weekly collection regime, one of the finest collection regimes for all waste in the whole of the country, and we maintain that stance through difficult times, even when others encourage us to drop back from that. And we maintain that even through the difficult days of COVID. I'll come on back to COVID in a moment. One of the things that we've been intent on doing and have always done is to put Medway first, Medway peoples first, and that sometimes excuse me, has brought us into conflict with other stakeholders, certainly brought us into conflict with government, not least most recently the dispute with the government over the housing of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and that rumbles on because we firmly believe that we should put Medway children first, and rather than packing them off to some northern or western part of the country, or even to Scotland to make room for incomers, that's not an approach that we have necessarily agreed with, and that has resulted in legal challenges to the government. I think that's the right approach. And I think looking after Medway's interest is most recently exemplified by our minor spat with Kent County Council over our Bring sites, where the County Council had, until very recently, made a contribution to funding of those Bring sites in recognition of the fact that many Kent residents use our sites. That funding was arbitrarily withdrawn, and our response to that has been that now Medway's 3 Bring sites are for Medway residents only. And the reason given for that was, well, we now have a new site at Allington. So I'm afraid Kent residents that live in Lawswood or Walderslade, they can trot off to Allington for getting rid of their waste now and take that up with their local county councillor if they want. So that's, I think, is the latest example of putting Medway first. And I think one of the things in that connection we've done, and I've been heavily involved in personally, is working more widely across the county, across the southeast, and in turn working with and lobbying government for changes. Government of whatever colour. And I can remember going to see a Labour minister, call me Phil, he said, when we went in, We did call him Phil, but we didn't come away with any more money. So there you are. So there's a commonality there between government ministers of any colour. They talk nicely and give you a cup of tea, but you don't get much else. But anyway, we always have to try. But I think working with partners, I'll close on this issue, working with partners has been one of our big pluses, and we're seeing that all across the spectrum of the public sector, and most recently being well inside and influencing the developments of the ICS, the Kent and Medway ICS, because that is so pivotal in our discussions with health and plays back to the GP things I was talking about. But I think the thing that I shall remember most fondly, personally, is the way, and I referred to this earlier, the way that we dealt with the problems associated with COVID. And I think that our response to that was exemplary, and we led the way. At times, the first few months, that was dealt with on a cross-party basis, quite rightly so. And when things calmed down, we dropped back to using the executive model only, and I think that was right for the time as well. I don't think there has been a council in recent times, and I hope there is never again, that has to deal on a daily basis with life or death decisions for its residents. And I think the way we dealt with that, where we took decisions, I took decisions on a daily basis, often saving people's lives, I think that is, surely that is what we're elected to do. So I think I'll make two comments in closing, and then I'll close the meeting. Firstly is to address to the Chief Executive, and I'd like him to take back the thanks of this Cabinet and this Conservative administration to your officers for the role that you play in delivering all of these things, because quite clearly, without the exemplary work and the good counsel and advice of senior officers, none of these things could have been delivered. You helped us formulate our policy and helped us deliver those policies. And the final thing I want to do is thank this Cabinet for all its hard work. Some of us in this room have been around since the first Cabinet in 2001. We won't be around afterwards, but I look forward to seeing some of you as portfolio holders at the next Cabinet meeting in July. Thank you for what you've done. Wish you well for the future. Meeting closed.